Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to talk about the upcoming awards for the NFL honors. Now, the actual award ceremony is a little less than a month away, so let's start talking about who we think are going to win these awards. Now, we're not going to go over all of these awards because some of these, we don't really care that much about. We're going to mainly go over the big ones that everybody really cares about. We might talk about some of these other ones here as well, but we're going to just kind of focus on the main ones. Now, if you're new to the channel, we do some Madden stuff here. We do some NFL stuff here. This is my second channel. I have my main Madden channel linked in the description if you have just never come across that for some reason. Most of you over here probably know me for that channel, but let's get into it. So, most valuable player award. Now, this has been kind of a weird year for most valuable player, I would say, because most years there's more of a kind of a clear-cut guy. This year, I mean, it's gone up and down all year. There's been so many names thrown out at so many different parts of the year. So many guys were like in the lead, and then another guy kind of took the lead, and there's just been no like super impressive teams this year. I would say maybe the Packers, but outside of them, there hasn't been like a clear-cut favorite, whereas usually there's a favorite or two, and everybody's kind of said this has been a weird NFL year. Now, when it comes to most valuable player, there was some talks about even the running backs at one point, but that kind of fell off because the Colts didn't make the playoffs, so Jonathan Taylor clearly wouldn't be in that conversation. Derrick Henry got hurt, and even while he got hurt, the Titans really didn't miss much of a beat. They still got the 1 seed, so it kind of takes a little bit of the value out of that as well. It really is kind of a quarterback award, unless there's like a really rare exception. And even last year, Derrick Henry with 2,000 yards wasn't the exception last year. Now, I think a lot of people are going to go with Aaron Rodgers here. I think that's what I'm going to go with as well. I do think Tom Brady's in the conversation. I do think a distant third could maybe be Joe Burrow, but I think it's going to go to Aaron Rodgers for a second year in a row. He was very efficient again this year. He doesn't have like the highest stats. Like there are some guys with more, yards and touchdowns, I believe, but he's always like seems to be the most efficient, doesn't throw a ton of interceptions, and he's only lost 2 games this year. Now, the Packers did lose 4 games, but 2 of those games Jordan Love started, so he only lost 2 games this year. They have the best record in the league. A lot of times, the MVP will go to the best player on the best team, and I think Aaron Rodgers definitely has to be the favorite here. I do think Tom Brady is in this conversation. I think those are the 2 main guys, but I'm going with Aaron Rodgers. I think he's going to win it for the second year in a row. Now, Coach of the Year is very interesting. There's 4 names that I have here, and I'm going to say really it's 2 names that I really strongly believe are the top 2 guys. But if I had to name 4 guys, you're going to go with Mike Vrabel of the Titans. You're going to go with Zach Taylor of the Bengals, Matt LaFleur of the Packers, and then the 4th guy, who I guess really technically wouldn't be in the running because they didn't actually make the playoffs. I do think Sean Payton's like in the conversation just because of the amount of injuries they suffered this year. They still had a winning record. Had the Rams beat the Niners and they got into the playoffs, I think he would have a stronger case, but because he didn't actually get into the playoffs, I don't really think he's too seriously in the conversation. But they set a record this year for the most starters starting a game with like 50 something because they just had so many injuries and then a lot of people on the COVID list and stuff like that. So through the adversity, they still had a winning record, which was very impressive. And you could say the same about the Titans. The Titans were almost as injured as the Saints, or maybe equally as injured. I think the biggest difference is they didn't lose their QB, and that's like the toughest thing. You can't replace a quarterback. That's the tough thing, which I think makes the Saints situation a little bit worse. But I think the 2 main candidates are going to be Mike Vrabel and Zach Taylor. Mike Vrabel because of the injuries factoring in and the fact they still were able to get the 1 seed and without their best player, Derrick Henry. And then Zach Taylor because you take a team that's been irrelevant for the past few years and now, boom, they jump up and win the division. They make a big jump. I do think Matt LaFleur gets some love because he is a good coach. They had the best record in the league, and they probably could have had a better record had they not had to start Jordan Love the 1 game. And also, this last game, they just kind of benched some guys because they just didn't need to play. They could have went this whole year and probably lost 2 games. But I think I'm going to go with Zach Taylor because this is what I think Coach of the Year typically, I think what gives a coach the biggest edge in this award is when you take a team that was kind of irrelevant and bad, and then boom, they made a big jump. And the Bengals are that team. They're a team that, hadn't been in the playoffs for a little bit. They've been bad, and now you jump up and win the division. When you make a big leap, usually that guy kind of gets the nod for Coach of the Year. I think it's between him and Vrabel. I think they both deserve it. But I think the edge goes to the guy that took the team that wasn't good and now, helped make them good. So I'm going to go with Zach Taylor on that one. Comeback Player of the Year, this is another award where kind of a toss-up. There's a few names in here. Obviously, Dak Prescott. Joe Burrow even can go in this because he did have a terrible injury last year, and then look how he bounced back this year, had an amazing second year. I think Nick Bosa's a guy you talk about in here as well, had a bad injury, came back and was dominant this year. There's quite a few big name guys that had some bad injuries last year and have bounced back and had really good seasons. If I had to lean to somebody, I think I'm going to lean Dak Prescott with this award because I guess he got injured a little bit earlier in the season. It's a pretty bad injury, and this year he had a really, really good year. I think Joe Burrow, I don't know if him being like a younger player really, I don't know if that matters. Because it's like you got hurt in your rookie season, and it's just like, are you technically considered a comeback player in your second year? I feel like I don't know how that works. I don't know if that's like a technicality. It's probably not. But I feel like typically more veteran players typically win this award. So I'm going to go with Dak Prescott here, but there's definitely, like I said, those three names. There's probably even a couple other guys that I'm not thinking about. You know, Derwin James could probably go in that running as well. He's had, back-to-back years with some bad injuries and had to miss time, and then he finally got to play a full season, and he's just as great as he was as a rookie. So, I mean, there's always a lot of names here. I think Dak Prescott, had a pretty serious injury, and he's like a really big name. He plays for the Cowboys. I don't know if any of that matters. It just seems like he's kind of the, highest profile guy. So I think he'll win this. Offensive Player of the Year, there's two guys here. We know the two names. It's either Cooper Kupp or it's Jonathan Taylor. Both of these guys had phenomenal years. Just amazing in their own ways. I think this is going to be Cooper Kupp, though, for a couple of reasons. Number one, he got really close to breaking 2 records. He didn't break them, but he was very, very close to both. And I understand there was an extra game, but, even by that logic, well, why weren't any other guys close to breaking those records? He was still far and away, better than every other receiver this year. So that's one thing going for him. He had probably, you could argue maybe, I don't know if you could say best year for a receiver ever, because he didn't break any records, but like the collection of stats that he put together. You've had guys that have just had big touchdown years. You've had guys that had big catch years like the Michael Thomas year. You've had guys that had the yards year like Calvin Johnson. The fact that he led in all 3 major statistical categories for receiving with receptions, yards, and touchdowns, the Triple Crown. I don't know how many times it's been done. I'm going to assume that hasn't been done too many times. Usually a guy, they'll have catches, or they'll have yards, or they might have catches and yards, or they might have touchdowns, but to have all 3, you don't typically see that too often. So that's why I think he's going to win it. The fact that he led in all 3 statistical categories there, got close to 2 records, I think he's going to get the edge over Jonathan Taylor. And I think when you talk about top receiving seasons of all time, it's probably in the top 3, I would think. Top 3, top 4, whereas Jonathan Taylor's year was very good, but I don't even know if it was a top 5 running back season. Probably top 10-ish, but I don't know if it was top 5. So I think Cooper Kupp's receiving season was just a little bit more impressive than Jonathan Taylor's rushing season. But they both deserve a lot of talk in this award. I think a distant third who's not going to win it, but deserves to be talked about, is Deebo Samuel. He had an amazing year as well. Very versatile player doing it, in multiple phases of the game. He won't win it, but I just think as a distant third, he deserves to be talked about because he also did have a very special season as well. Defensive Player of the Year, for me, this one is pretty clear-cut. I think it has to be TJ Watt. A lot of people thought he should have won it. At some point over the past couple years, I was in agreement with Aaron Donald the last couple years. I still think Aaron Donald is probably the best overall defensive player when you look at advanced metrics and stuff like that. TJ Watt's obviously still a special player, but when you get 22.5 sacks, I mean, at some point, I don't think sacks are definitely not everything for a defensive lineman. You can't just judge sacks, but when you get 22.5 of them, when you get that many, when you tie a record that has, been in, set for a long time. And again, he had an extra game, but he missed a couple games. So the argument is, well, he had an extra opportunity because, people miss games in the past and they don't have that 17th game to maybe make up for it. I get it, but he still actually did it in under 16 actual games. So still very impressive. When you tie a record like that, 22.5 sacks, I think that alone is just special enough that you have to give that guy the award. They've earned that. So to me, this really isn't a competition. I think, The other years there was, the talk of TJ Watt or Aaron Donald. Like, there was a debate to at least be had. This year, I think TJ Watt runs away with it. Offensive Rookie of the Year is an interesting one because this one kind of went back and forth for a little bit. Jamar Chase was running away with it, but as of a few weeks ago, Mac Jones was he took the lead for a little bit when he was really just putting together a string of good games, and Jamar Chase was kind of being a little, I guess, more quiet during a few games. But then the end of the season, it kind of went the other way, and Jamar Chase just took back control of this, and I think he kind of ran away with it at that point. The betting odds on this have shifted throughout the year. Like Jamar Chase was the clear favorite, with Mac Jones kind of being a distant second, and then there was a point in time where Mac Jones was the betting favorite for a little bit, and Jamar Chase was a little bit of a distant second. But the way the year ended, Jamar Chase, last few games, really kicked it up into gear, set the rookie receiving record for a game. 1,400 yards in a season, broke the Bengals receiving yard record, put up 13 touchdowns. He's going to win this award, I think. I do think Mac Jones and Najee Harris deserve to be talked about. They definitely deserve to be in the conversation because they also had impressive years. Usually the quarterback would probably get the nod if Mac Jones had finished the year a little bit better because it is such an important position. But I think the way Chase finished the year, as opposed to how Mac finished the year, I think Chase is going to pretty easily take this one. Defensive Rookie of the Year is a clear-cut easy one. It's Micah Parsons. There's literally nobody else even worth talking about. That doesn't mean there were some other good defensive rookies this year, don't get me wrong, but Micah Parsons was so clear-cut, far and away the best rookie. He looked like a 5-year veteran. He just looked like a guy that's been dominating this league for years. I would say even he was more impressive than Jamar Chase was when you talk about rookies overall. The impact, they both made crazy impacts, but and I'm a LSU fan, so I have bias towards Jamar Chase for sure, but Micah Parsons was just on a different level this year. There's literally no competition. This is probably, of all the awards, this is probably the easiest one because no one else is even in this conversation. Clutch Performance of the Year. Honestly, I don't really know who this would go to. I think off the top of my head, the funny thing is the most clutch performance that I can remember, maybe because it was so recent, was Justin Herbert against the Raiders last week. Now, I know they didn't win the game, but I've just never seen a player make more clutch, timely plays, more fourth down conversions, more just absolutely insane throws. I'm going to assume you had to win the game to win this award. So, there's definitely some guys that had some clutch performances here. But I feel like what Justin Herbert did in that game was crazy. I don't know who this would go to because I can't remember every single performance. But I just kind of wanted to mention that. I think FedEx Air and Ground Players of the Year. I think Ground Player definitely goes to Jonathan Taylor. I think the finalists for this, when you look at the awards, like the weekly awards throughout the year, Jonathan Taylor won it 4 times. Mixon and Derrick Henry won it 3 times each. Henry, if he doesn't get hurt, would have probably won this. Mixon definitely deserves some mention here, but I think Jonathan Taylor pretty easily takes the ground. The Air Award is interesting because when you look at the weekly awards, Justin Herbert won this 6 times during the year, which is pretty insane. Joe Burrow got it 4 times. And I believe Dak and Brady got it 3 times each. So looking at that, the fact that Justin Herbert had 2 more than anybody else, I think Justin Herbert is going to actually win this award. So, just a nice kind of nod to, they didn't make the playoffs, but he did have a very good second season as well. I think he will win that. And lastly, Fan of the Year, I think, not that this is like an important award, but because of this year, it's funny. This has to probably go to that Bucs fan that got the Brady, I think it was his 600th touchdown pass, and Mike Evans gave it to him by accident, and they had to give him like a ton of stuff to trade the ball back. So I think that's just a funny one worth mentioning. He'll probably win that award because of kind of the significance of what happened there. But yeah, let me know what you think. Who do you think are going to win the awards below? Let me know. Subscribe if you're new, and I will see you guys next time.